I still remembered the day Natalie and I signed the original investment agreement. We sat across from each other in a tiny rented office with peeling paint and secondhand furniture. She smiled. One day this company will become something incredible. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. It already is. She laughed. No, it will be when people respect me for my work, not because I'm your wife. I nodded. Then we'll keep our marriage private. She smiled even brighter. No favoritism. No shortcuts. Just hard work. For both of us. 6 years later, that promise still shaped everything we did. To every employee, I was nothing more than the company's strategy manager. Nobody knew I remained a majority shareholder through the original investment agreement. I had never wanted attention. I wanted Natalie to earn every bit of respect herself. The annual welcome ceremony filled the company's grand auditorium with applause and excited conversations. New employees sat together in the front rows while department managers lined the sides of the hall. Natalie stepped onto the stage. She looked confident as always. Welcome, everyone. The room applauded. We're excited to have you join our family. Smiles spread across the audience. This company was built through trust, teamwork, and respect. More applause followed. I watched quietly from the second row. Everything felt ordinary, until one of the interns suddenly stood. He walked confidently toward the stage without being invited. Several employees exchanged confused looks. Natalie frowned slightly. Can I help you? The young man smiled. My name is Ethan. She nodded politely. Welcome to the company. Instead of returning to his seat, he stepped beside her. Then, without warning, he casually wrapped one arm around her shoulders. The entire auditorium fell silent. Even I stopped breathing for a moment. Natalie's eyes widened. Ethan, he laughed confidently. I figured everyone should know. She looked completely caught off guard. Know what? He grinned at the audience. I'm her husband. Gasps echoed through the hall. Several interns looked stunned. Managers whispered among themselves. I watched Natalie carefully. For one brief second, I expected her to step away. Instead, she laughed awkwardly. Oh, she glanced around the room. Don't make things awkward. Her nervous smile remained frozen. She never corrected him. My heart sank, not because of the lie, because of the silence. The employees quickly assumed everything was some strange joke. Laughter spread through the auditorium. Someone clapped. Another employee laughed even harder. I remained seated, quietly smiling. Ethan noticed me immediately. He pointed toward me. What's with that guy? Several people turned. He laughed. You look jealous. The crowd chuckled again. Another employee whispered loudly. Maybe he had a crush on the CEO. More laughter followed. I simply smiled. The truth never needed to compete with noise. Ethan folded his arms and looked at me with an amused grin. What? He laughed. Cat got a tongue. I slowly stood from my seat. The auditorium became quieter. Natalie finally spoke. Ethan, he interrupted her. Relax. He smiled confidently. Everyone's having fun. I looked at him calmly. Are you finished? He smirked. You sound upset. I don't. You look jealous. Several employees nodded, believing his version of events. One whispered, poor guy. Another chuckled. He probably wishes he were in Ethan's place. I ignored every comment. There was no point arguing with people who didn't know the truth. Ethan stepped closer. You work here, right? I do. What department? Strategy. He shrugged. Well, don't worry. He patted my shoulder as though we were old friends. I'm sure you'll get over your little crush on the CEO. The room erupted with laughter again. I glanced toward Natalie. She looked deeply uncomfortable. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, I silently gave her the opportunity to end everything with a single sentence. She only lowered her gaze. That answer hurt more than Ethan's arrogance. I took a slow breath. I have no interest in embarrassing anyone. Ethan smiled proudly. See, he understands. I looked directly at him. But I do have one piece of advice. He crossed his arms. I'm listening. So, is everyone else? The auditorium became completely silent. I spoke slowly. Be careful with the role you choose to play. His smile remained. Why? Because some lies cost more than careers. For the first time, his confidence wavered. What does that mean? I smiled politely. You'll understand when the time comes. He forced a laugh. That's the best threat you've got. It isn't a threat. Then what is it? A warning. Several employees exchanged puzzled looks. One manager whispered, "What's he talking about?" Another quietly replied, "No idea." Ethan shook his head. "You strategy people really like sounding mysterious. I prefer being honest." He laughed again. "Sure you do." Natalie finally stepped toward the microphone. "Let's continue this ceremony." Her voice lacked its usual confidence. The applause that followed sounded forced. As department heads resumed, welcoming the new employees, I quietly walked toward the exit. No one tried to stop me. Most assumed I had left because I was embarrassed. Only Natalie watched me go. I could feel her eyes following every step. Outside the auditorium, I paused for a moment and looked back through the glass doors. Inside, everyone continued smiling and celebrating, completely unaware of what had just happened. They believed an ordinary strategy manager had been humiliated by an arrogant intern. None of them knew the man walking away had helped build the company from an empty office into one of the city's fastest-growing businesses. None of them knew I still legally owned the majority of the company through the original investment agreement. Most importantly, none of them realized that the lie they had laughed at would soon force every person in that auditorium to confront a truth they had never imagined. Without another word, I turned and walked down the hallway. Sometimes the strongest move wasn't exposing the truth immediately. Sometimes it was allowing a lie to grow just long enough for everyone to witness the consequences when it finally collapsed. I arrived at the office the next morning as though nothing had happened. I greeted the receptionist, picked up my coffee, and walked toward my department. The whispers began before I reached my desk. "That's him, the strategy manager. The intern embarrassed him yesterday." I pretended not to hear. A junior analyst smiled awkwardly. "Morning, sir." "Good morning." She hesitated. "I hope you're doing all right." I smiled. "I've had worse mornings." She laughed nervously before returning to her desk. Rumors traveled faster than emails. By lunchtime, almost everyone had heard a different version of the story. Some believed I had secretly admired Natalie. Others claimed Ethan had exposed my feelings in front of the entire company. Not one rumor contained the truth. My office door opened. Daniel walked inside, carrying 2 cups of coffee. As expected, I accepted one. "Thank you." He closed the door. "I've spent the entire morning listening to nonsense." "I imagined you would." He sat across from me. So what? When are you ending this?" I stir my coffee. "I'm not." He frowned. "You own the company." "I know. You could expose everything before lunch." "I could." "Then why won't you?" I lean back. "Because this isn't only about Ethan." "What do you mean?" "I want to know something." "What?" "Who values facts?" Daniel waited. "And who blindly follows gossip?" He slowly nodded. "So this is a test." "In a way. You're letting people reveal themselves." "Exactly." He smiled. "That's very much like you." "Is that a compliment?" "It depends on how patient you're feeling." I laughed quietly. "I'm patient enough." Daniel looked thoughtful. "You still believe Natalie deserves the chance to explain herself?" "I do, but—" I stared out the office window. Her silence changed something. He didn't interrupt. I always believed she would stand beside me. And now, I don't know. A soft knock interrupted us. Natalie stepped inside. "Daniel." He immediately stood. "I'll give you two some privacy." After he left, she quietly closed the door. She looked exhausted. "I barely slept." "I can see that." She took a slow breath. "I owe you an apology." I remained silent. I should have corrected Ethan immediately. Yes. I only wanted to avoid creating a scene. I looked directly into her eyes. And instead, I created something worse. She lowered her head. "I know. I wasn't embarrassed by Ethan." She looked up. "I was hurt by your silence." Fresh guilt appeared across her face. "I never meant to hurt you." "I believe you." "You do?" "Yes." Hope briefly appeared in her eyes. But good intentions don't erase consequences. Her shoulders dropped. "I understand." The room became quiet. Neither of us had anything more to say. Some wounds couldn't be healed with apologies alone. Natalie quietly left my office, and I returned to work as though our conversation had never happened. Outside, however, the rumors only continued growing. Later that afternoon, Noah from sales knocked on my door. Got a minute? Of course. He stepped inside and looked uncomfortable. I thought you should know what's happening. What happened? It's Ethan. I raised an eyebrow. What about him? He's introducing himself to clients like he already belongs in executive management. I sighed quietly. Has anyone corrected him? They've tried. And he keeps saying the CEO trusts him completely. I nodded slowly. I see. Before Noah could continue, raised voices echoed from the hallway. Ethan walked confidently through the office with several new interns following behind him. He pointed toward different departments. We'll probably reorganize this floor soon. One intern looked surprised. Really? He grinned. I've already discussed a few ideas with Natalie. Another employee asked, shouldn't department heads approve those changes? Ethan laughed. When you're close to the CEO, approvals become easy. Several employees exchanged uncertain looks. I quietly watched from my office doorway. A senior manager approached Ethan. Mr. Ethan. Yes. The logistics team is asking whether your instructions came from Ms. Natalie. Ethan smiled confidently. They're practically the same thing. The manager frowned. I'll need written confirmation. You worry too much. He casually waved his hand. Just tell them I approved it. The manager walked away without answering. Within hours, the confusion spread across multiple departments. Some employees followed Ethan's directions. Others refused. Projects slowed. Meetings were postponed. Even routine approvals became tangled in unnecessary questions. Near the end of the day, Daniel entered my office again. I've been reviewing today's reports. They're not good. No. He handed me several documents. 3 department heads filed formal complaints. I read the first page. Unauthorized instructions. Misrepresentation of authority. Client confusion. I placed the papers back on my desk. It escalated quickly. Daniel nodded. And it isn't stopping. Just then, my phone vibrated. The caller ID displayed the chairman of the board. I answered immediately. This is Nathan. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. His voice remained calm. We've received multiple reports concerning serious confusion within executive operations. I expected as much. The board has decided to intervene. I remained silent. An emergency executive meeting has been scheduled for Friday morning. I'll be there. We would appreciate that. The call ended. Daniel looked at me. The board. I nodded. They're finally paying attention. He smiled faintly. I have a feeling Friday is going to change everything. I looked through the glass wall toward the busy office. Ethan continued laughing with several employees, completely unaware of what had already begun. He believed popularity made him powerful. He believed borrowed authority could never be questioned. Most of all, he believed every lie would continue protecting him. In only a few days, the board would separate confidence from competence, gossip from truth, and appearances from reality. For the first time since the welcome ceremony, I realized the moment I had been waiting for was finally approaching. I arrived at the company earlier than usual on the morning of the emergency board meeting. The executive floor felt unusually quiet, as though the building itself understood something important was about to happen. Daniel met me outside the boardroom. You look calm. I am. He smiled. I've known you long enough to recognize that expression. What expression? The one you wear before changing someone's entire perspective. I laughed softly. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I know. He held up a thick folder. I brought the original documents. The investment agreement? He nodded. And the shareholder registry. Good. He looked toward the closed boardroom doors. They're already arguing. I expected that. Inside the room, raised voices echoed through the hallway. One director spoke firmly. This confusion has already damaged our reputation. Another added, several clients questioned our leadership this week. A third looked directly at Ethan. Can you explain your behavior? Ethan leaned back confidently. I think everyone's overreacting. The chairman frowned. You introduced yourself as the CEO's husband. Ethan smiled. It was harmless. One director shook his head. It created widespread confusion. So this company cannot operate on misunderstandings. Ethan shrugged. I was only joking. Another director opened a complaint file. These reports say you gave instructions to department managers. They asked for guidance. You aren't authorized to give it. I was helping. The chairman looked toward Natalie. Ms. Natalie. She straightened in her chair. Yes. Did you authorize Mr. Ethan to represent executive leadership? She answered immediately. No. The room became quiet. Ethan looked surprised. Natalie? She wouldn't meet his eyes. I never gave you that authority. His confident smile weakened. I thought. You assumed. One director closed the complaint file. That assumption has already cost the company valuable time. Ethan forced another laugh. This whole thing is getting blown out of proportion. The chairman looked toward the door. Mr. Daniel. Daniel entered carrying the leather folder. Several directors nodded respectfully. Good morning. He placed the folder carefully on the conference table. I've been asked to present several documents before today's discussion continues. Ethan whispered to Natalie. Why is the company lawyer making this so dramatic? She remained silent. Daniel slowly opened the folder. Inside rested a set of aged legal papers. The original signatures remained perfectly preserved. One director smiled knowingly. It's been years since I've seen those. Daniel nodded. So has everyone else. He carefully placed the first document in the center of the table. The original shareholder agreement. Every executive leaned forward. Ethan looked confused. What does that have to do with me? Daniel calmly closed the folder. Everything. The room fell completely silent. He looked around the table before speaking again. The majority owner of this company has decided to attend today's meeting in person. Every conversation stopped. Even the air seemed to stand still. The boardroom doors slowly opened. Every eye turned toward the entrance. I stepped inside without saying a word. For a brief second, complete silence filled the room. Then something happened that Ethan never expected. Every member of the board stood. The chairman smiled warmly. Good morning, Mr. Nathan. Thank you for coming. I nodded respectfully. Good morning. One by one, the directors greeted me. It's good to see you again. We appreciate your attendance. Please have a seat. I thanked each of them before taking the chair reserved at the head of the conference table. Across the room, Ethan stared at me in disbelief. Then he laughed. This has to be some kind of mistake. Nobody answered. He pointed toward me. He's the strategy manager. A few seconds passed. Still, no one spoke. He forced another smile. Seriously, someone tell him he's in the wrong meeting. The chairman calmly folded his hands. Mr. Ethan. Yes. Mr. Nathan has every right to be here. Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? Because he is the majority shareholder of this company. The words echoed through the silent room. Ethan blinked several times. What? Daniel slid the shareholder agreement across the polished table. The original investment contract. Ethan stared at it without understanding. That can't be right. Daniel pointed toward the signatures. 6 years ago, Mr. Nathan provided the founding investment that saved this company during its earliest days. One director nodded. Without him, this company would never have survived its first year. Another director added, his ownership has never changed. Ethan looked toward Natalie. Tell them. She didn't answer. Natalie. Her face had turned completely pale. Her eyes remained fixed on the legal documents. Suddenly, forgotten memories flooded back. The tiny rented office. The sleepless nights. The endless business plans. The stack of legal papers she had signed without hesitation because she trusted me completely. She slowly covered her mouth. Oh, a tear formed in her eye. I remember. The room remained silent. She looked at me with overwhelming regret. The shareholder agreement. I nodded quietly. You finally remembered. Her shoulders trembled. I signed those papers. You did. You told me the company would belong to both of us. I meant every word. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. And I forgot. You were busy building the future we dreamed about. She whispered softly. And I forgot the person who made that future possible. Ethan suddenly pushed back his chair. No, this doesn't make sense. He looked around desperately. He's just an employee. The chairman calmly corrected him. He chose to work as an employee. Daniel smiled faintly. There is a significant difference. Every executive remained standing until I gave a small nod for them to sit. The simple gesture made Ethan realize something he had refused to believe. The quiet strategy manager he had mocked was the one person in the room with more authority than everyone else combined. For the first time since walking into the company, the confidence that had carried him through every lie completely disappeared. The silence inside the boardroom lasted several long seconds. No one seemed eager to speak first after the truth had turned everything upside down. Finally, the chairman looked toward the company's legal advisor, Mr. Daniel. Daniel stood and gathered the remaining documents. I believe the board deserves complete clarification. Several directors nodded. So do we. Daniel opened another folder. The shareholder agreement establishes that Mr. Nathan has remained the majority shareholder since the company's founding. He placed certified copies before every director. The ownership structure has never changed. One director adjusted his glasses. So the records have been accurate all along. Daniel nodded. Yes. He continued. There is one additional matter requiring official confirmation. The room became quiet again. He looked toward Natalie and then at me. Mr. Nathan and Ms. Natalie are legally married. Several directors exchanged surprised glances. One quietly whispered, I had no idea. Another looked genuinely impressed. They kept it secret for 6 years. Daniel smiled politely. They believe the company should grow through merit instead of favoritism. The chairman turned toward me. Mr. Nathan. Yes. Would you explain why you chose to hide both your ownership and your marriage? I stood slowly. It wasn't about secrecy. The directors listened carefully. It was about fairness. I glanced toward Natalie. When we started this company, we made each other a promise. She lowered her eyes. We agreed that every promotion, every contract, and every achievement would be earned. I continued. I never wanted employees to think the CEO succeeded because of her husband. One director nodded with respect. So you stepped into the background. Exactly. Another director smiled. That required remarkable restraint. It required trust. The room fell silent again. I believe the company would become stronger if people respected Natalie for her leadership rather than my ownership. The chairman leaned back. And did it. For many years, yes. Natalie quietly wiped away a tear. I forgot why we made that promise. I looked at her gently. It happens. She shook her head. It shouldn't have. Daniel closed the folder. The legal status is now completely clear. Every director nodded. There was no longer any uncertainty about who owned the company or why the truth had remained hidden. Only one question still remained unanswered. The chairman slowly turned toward Ethan. He folded his hands. Mr. Ethan. Ethan straightened nervously. Yes. We now need to discuss your conduct. For the first time since entering the boardroom, Ethan's confident smile failed to appear. Ethan cleared his throat and tried to smile. I think this has all been one big misunderstanding. The chairman remained expressionless. A misunderstanding? Yes. I never meant to cause any harm. One director leaned forward. Did you or did you not introduce yourself as the CEO's husband? Ethan hesitated. I was joking. Daniel opened another folder. We anticipated that response. He pressed a button on the conference room monitor. Security footage from the welcome ceremony appeared on the screen. The room watched in silence as Ethan confidently wrapped his arm around Natalie and announced, I'm her husband. The recording continued. Everyone heard me remain silent. Everyone heard Ethan mock me. Then the video ended. Daniel looked toward the board. This is only the first recording. He displayed additional footage from different days. One clip showed Ethan introducing himself to visiting clients as someone who belonged in executive leadership. Another showed him giving unauthorized instructions to department managers. A third captured him telling new employees that his approval carried the same authority as Natalie's. The evidence spoke louder than any explanation. The chairman looked at Ethan. Do you still believe this was merely a misunderstanding? Ethan's face turned pale. He struggled to answer. I was only trying to fit in. One director shook his head. You knowingly misrepresented yourself. Another added, you used the CEO's name for personal influence. Daniel placed several written statements on the table. These are testimonies from employees and department managers. The chairman reviewed them carefully. They all described the same pattern. He looked around the room. Does anyone believe Mr. Ethan acted without intent No director spoke. The silence was answer enough. The chairman finally announced, "The board will vote." Within seconds, every hand was raised. The decision was unanimous. "Mr. Ethan," the chairman's voice remained calm, "your internship is terminated effective immediately." Ethan lowered his head. "I understand." Security quietly entered the room. They did not touch him. One officer simply gestured toward the door. "This way, please." Without another word, Ethan slowly walked out of the boardroom. The confident young man who had entered believing he belonged among executives left with nothing except the consequences of his own choices. After the door closed, Natalie slowly stood. She faced every director before looking at the employees observing from the back of the room. "I owe everyone an apology." The room became silent. I should have corrected the misunderstanding the moment it happened. She glanced toward me. I stayed silent because I wanted to avoid embarrassing someone. A tear rolled down her cheek. Instead, I embarrassed the person who had always stood beside me. I met her eyes, but said nothing. She continued. I allowed one moment of hesitation to grow into days of confusion. Several directors nodded thoughtfully. The chairman spoke quietly. Leadership is measured as much by difficult truths as successful decisions. Natalie bowed her head. I've learned that lesson. As the meeting ended, I remained seated for a moment. Watching everything unfold, I realized how fragile trust truly was. It took years of honesty, sacrifice, and shared dreams to build. Yet only a few moments of silence to begin falling apart. The company had learned an important lesson that morning. Titles, wealth, and authority could earn attention. Only integrity earned lasting respect. The boardroom slowly emptied after the meeting ended. Directors gathered their documents, investors exchanged quiet conversations, and department heads returned to their offices. I remained seated. The chairman looked toward me. "Mr. Nathan." "Yes." "The company owes you more than gratitude." I smiled politely. "I never stayed for gratitude." "We know." He folded his hands. "The board would like to hear your plans." I stood and looked around the room. This company has always been bigger than any one person. Several directors nodded. It employs hundreds of families. It supports countless clients. It represents years of sacrifice. I paused. For that reason, I will remain the majority shareholder. Relief spread across several faces. One director smiled. "I'm glad to hear that." I continued, "But I won't return to daily management." The room became quiet. Another director frowned. "May I ask why?" "Because leadership depends on trust." I looked briefly toward Natalie. "And trust isn't restored by a single meeting." The chairman slowly nodded. "A fair point. I'll continue protecting the company's future." I placed a proposal on the table. The executive team should continue managing daily operations while the board strengthens oversight. Daniel reviewed the document. "This creates additional accountability." "Exactly." One investor smiled. "That should restore confidence." "I hope so." The chairman accepted the proposal. "The board approves." A wave of agreement moved across the room. The future of the company had finally become clear. As everyone prepared to leave, Daniel walked beside me. "You handled that better than anyone expected." "I wasn't trying to win." "I know. You were trying to protect what mattered." I nodded. "The employees didn't deserve to suffer because of someone else's mistakes." Daniel smiled. "That's why the board trusts you." We stepped into the executive hallway together. Through the glass entrance, I noticed Ethan walking toward the lobby, carrying a small cardboard box containing the few belongings he had brought during his short internship. His confident stride was gone. His shoulders were lowered. Employees quietly watched him pass. No one laughed. No one mocked him. The silence itself carried enough weight. He stopped when he noticed me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he took a slow breath. "I ruined everything." I answered calmly. "You ruined an opportunity." He nodded sadly. "I wanted people to admire me. You chose the fastest path. I thought pretending would make me important. It only made the truth more painful." He looked down at the box in his hands. "I've never been this ashamed." I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "I hope you learn from it." He nodded once. "I will." Without another word, he walked toward the exit. The automatic doors opened. then quietly closed behind him. The opportunity of a lifetime disappeared with him. After Ethan left, the executive floor became unusually quiet. Most employees returned to work, but the atmosphere felt different. The rumors had ended. The truth had taken their place. As I gathered my briefcase, I heard soft footsteps behind me. Nathan. I turned. Natalie stood in the hallway. Her eyes were tired from hours of holding back tears. Can we talk? I nodded. For a few minutes. We walked into the small conference room where we had planned countless projects together over the years. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. I've replayed that day in my mind 100 times. I listened quietly. Ethan's lie wasn't the worst part. She looked directly at me. My silence was. I nodded slowly. Yes. Tears filled her eyes. I thought I was avoiding an awkward moment. Instead, you created a painful one. She lowered her head. I failed you. I answered honestly. You did. She struggled to continue. I kept hoping you would understand why I hesitated. I understand. She looked surprised. You do? Yes. Then why does this still hurt so much? I took a slow breath. Because understanding someone's reason doesn't erase the wound they caused. She wiped away another tear. I never wanted you to stand there alone. But I did. The room became silent again. She reached for my hand. I'll spend the rest of my life earning your trust back. I gently stepped away. I believe you want to. Hope appeared in her eyes. But I met her gaze. Real partners defend each other, even when it's uncomfortable. Her shoulders trembled. I forgot that. For one moment, she nodded, and that moment changed everything. I know. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. I don't deserve another chance. I remained quiet before answering. I forgive you. She looked up quickly. You do. I forgive you for my own peace of mind. Her expression softened. But I can't pretend nothing happened. The hope in her eyes slowly faded. I understand. She gave a small, sad smile. I'll always be grateful that you believed in me before anyone else. I'll always be grateful for the dreams we built together. Those were the last words we shared. I picked up my briefcase and walked toward the elevators. As the doors opened, employees throughout the executive floor began standing. One after another. Emma smiled warmly. Thank you, Mr. Nathan. Another manager nodded. You protected the company, a senior analyst added. Most people would have chosen revenge. I smiled. Revenge never builds anything. The elevator doors closed. A few minutes later, I stepped outside the headquarters. The afternoon sun reflected across the glass building we had created from nothing. I paused for only a moment, not because I doubted my decision, but because I appreciated the journey that had brought me there. The greatest victory had never been proving I was the real husband. It had never been proving I owned the company. It had been proving that honesty, patience, and self-respect would always outlast pride, deception, and borrowed titles. With a peaceful smile, I walked toward the future. This time, I wasn't carrying secrets. I was carrying something far more valuable. The certainty that no matter where life led me next, I would never again sacrifice my dignity for the comfort of silence.